What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to talk about Blackbird by the Beatles, such a masterpiece of modern music, but this is not going to be a guitar tutorial on the song, okay? So if you're looking for learning note by note what is going on in this song and all of the sections and everything, the techniques, the chords, this is not the right lesson for you, this is not the right video for you, because today we're going to talk about the theory. So if instead you are interested in learning what's the music theory behind Blackbird by the Beatles, that's indeed the right video for you. So we're going to divide the song in three sections: a quick riff, which is what you find in the intro and in the verse of the song, then the chord progression for the verse, and the chord progression for the chorus, okay? Now, the song was recorded and performed by Paul McCartney on both vocals and guitar, and the inspiration for this song comes from a classical piece by Bach, which is called the Bourrée, and there are interviews of Paul McCartney talking about that. And also we need to keep in mind that these guys were literally making the history of music, but their knowledge of music theory wasn't necessarily at the level that you would expect to compose something like that. And this demonstrates once more, if we need one more demonstration, that you don't really need to know music theory to write incredible chord progressions and fantastic songs, really, okay? So there is absolutely nothing wrong with the Beatles not knowing every single detail of these chord progressions. That absolutely doesn't matter. You don't need to know all the music theory behind this song to actually play this song or even to compose this song, okay? I was also fascinated by an interview where Paul McCartney was talking about when they were teenagers in Liverpool in the 60s, and they were all together catching a bus to go on the other side of Liverpool just to learn a different chord that they didn't know from somebody else. He said in the interview that they used to play all major and minor chords, and then they knew that a guy on the other side of the town actually knew how to play a B7, so they jumped on a bus, went on the other side of the city just to really figure out how to play a B7. That's very fascinating, and it also tells you a lot about the access to the music theory and to the music in general, to the guitar learning in general at the time, okay? And it should really make us very thankful for what we have right now, which is the access to all sorts of knowledge at a distance of a click only, all right? Now, just to make sure that we are all on the same page, because I don't know what's your personal, music theory knowledge, I just want to double check that we know the meaning of three things that I will say pretty often in this lesson. So one is going to be inversion. That's pretty basic. It just means that you play a chord with a different note from the root on the bass, okay? So if I play a chord like this is a G over B. The chord that I play is G, so the name of the first letter. After the slash you find another letter. That's another note that belongs to the G chord, but it's not the root. In this case, that's going to be the major third, and you place that note on the bass rather than the root, okay? So if you play a G, you don't need to say anything. That's a root position because the root is on the bass when you play the G as your lowest sound. But if instead you play the B, which is the major third on the bass, then you're playing an inversion, and particularly that's a first inversion, okay? Then another term that I will say pretty often is omit 5, which literally just means that you take the fifth out of the chord that you're going to play. And then I will also say rootless, which equally means that you don't play the root of the chord that you play, okay? If we are all good with that, let's get started with the riff. The riff goes like this. Now, we first play a G major. Now, when we play this chord, there's not much to say. We literally pluck the root and the major third simultaneously, and then the note that we play separately on its own, it's the open G. So it's again the root of this chord, like that, okay? You can play it with any technique, like a plucking, a more classical guitar plucking, or you can do that with a sort of strum and slap simultaneously, or flat picking, how somebody calls it. One final thing about the G, where we start from really, is that this is the first of a long series of omit 5 chords. There is no fifth in what you play here. It's literally root and third together, and then the root, or the octave if you like, of the root as a pedal. I would say almost as a pedal, because it's one of those common notes that you find in between every single chord, pretty much every single chord of the entire song. Okay, now moving on to the second chord, that's an A-7. Okay, I would say A-7 because after plucking A and C, so root and minor third, you do pluck the open G, okay, that pedal that we talked about earlier, and that is really the -7. So I would say that's an A-7, still omit 5. We did say that many chords will be omit 5. Now guys, if you need to, feel free to pause the video, grab your guitar, double check with me, you know, all of the single notes that I'm showing you, the names of those notes, the degrees that they represent on the chord that you're going to play, and also the positions in case you need to grab some positions that I might play differently from how you've seen or how you actually do, all right? Now let's continue with the next chord. The next chord is the first inversion that we find in this song. It's a G over B, as we said. So this G over B means that you play your G, imagine your G major, you take off the note G on top, you know, on the bass really, and what you get is the B on the bass. So that's the first inversion, the third is on the bass, and it's also an omit 5. So this is a G major with a B on the bass, G over B, first inversion, omit 5, because there's no D, there's no fifth like in the first chord. Okay, so to recap the first three, we've got just a G major, omit 5 if you like, A-7, again omit 5 if you like, and G over B. Okay, omit 5 of course. And then from here we slide all the way up. When you move all the way up, you're just playing the octave of this chord. I mean the same chord, G major, just one octave higher, because you've got the G here, the B here, this is the octave higher of this, and then the open G, your pedal in between all of the chords, like that. So that's again just a G major omit 5. Okay, so the riff that you find in the intro and in the verse of this song, which is so unique that most people really recognize immediately, goes like G major, A-7, G over B, and G. So in terms of analysis, this is literally, because we are in the key of G, 1, 2 minor, 1 in first inversion, 1 again. Okay, that's all what is going on up here until here. Now we're ready to get into the chord progression of the verse, okay, which is really gonna be very interesting for the chord analysis, okay. We basically play this. Okay guys, now I played it with a more traditional arpeggio, but you can still play it with the technique of slap and flick and, you know, strum simultaneously, like. There's almost a more old school blues technique when you play that, and it's very percussive, okay? Now there are a few positions that you might have seen played differently. So every time you've seen me playing a stretch like this, which we'll be analyzing in a minute, you can also play it like that. It's literally the same thing if you feel comfortable with this stretching, or if instead you like to play this same interval that we're going to discuss in a minute in this way. You know, really up to you. Just for the sake of mentioning what Paul McCartney does, he definitely plays it like that. So it's up to you really to choose whether you want to play your stretchings, or if you like this simpler position. Paul McCartney plays it like that, by the way. Now, guys, I don't want to get into a guitar tutorial, we said, but inevitably from time to time I will have to mention something about the chord positions that we are playing. But the main topic, the main subject is still the chord analysis, so let's get into the analysis of what we just played in the verse. So the C major is our fourth degree, okay? Because in the key of G major, C is the 4th degree, okay? Now, this is a very nice, it's a beautiful voicing for the C major. It's a spread voicing triad. So rather than playing what we call a closed position triad, so root, major third, and perfect fifth in the same octave, we are now taking the third and moving it 1 octave higher, spreading the voicing of this chord, of this triad, over 2 different octaves like that. And to me, they sound really bright and smooth, and I really love spread voicing triads. I recommend you to try, and use them as much as you can wherever you like them, okay? You can see me on the channel play them pretty often. Anyway, that being said, this interval, when you pluck the root and the major third, is also called a major 10th. Okay, some people call it this way. It just means that you play the major third 1 octave higher, and that's called the 10th, and then you play the open G, which is the perfect fifth. So this is just a spread voicing triad, but it's not Omit 5, Rootless, or Inversion, or anything like that. Just a C major 4th degree. The next chord is where we will start having some discussions, probably in the comments. And guys, feel free to comment and let me know, if you have different interpretations for these chords. These are just my personal points of view, but I will leave this pretty open. So let me know in the comments what you think, and if you want to discuss some other options for some of these chords. Now, when we play this chord, let's have a look at the notes that we play. We play a C sharp, a G, and then another G. Now, if we think about the interval between these 2 notes, that's a diminished fifth, you might start thinking about maybe we're playing a diminished chord here, okay? But this wouldn't really give you any real function of this chord. So when we talk about functional harmony, we're thinking about what is the chord progression in its whole. So in this case, we are going to a D. We should always look where we are going to. And how can you go to a D? In general, you can go to a major chord, or even to a minor chord, we'll see that in a minute, using the secondary dominant chord. The secondary dominant chord is really the 5 of the chord that you're going to, okay? It's one of the chord substitutions that we've got in harmony. And the way you do it is really thinking about what's the 5 of D. If you have a D major, the 5 is A7. So what I would say is that this chord really is an A7, okay, which is the 5 of D, which is the 5. So 5, D is the 5 of the key, and we're playing the 5 of the 5, okay, the secondary dominant of the 5, the 5/7 of the 5. Now you might wonder, like, how is that an A7 if there is no A in the chord? Well, here is where we get a rootless chord, okay? So an A7 would be made by A, the root, C sharp, the major third, which is here, okay? There is also a perfect fifth, which is the note E, but we don't have it in this position. And then the note G is the -7th, and we play it twice, okay? So this chord is literally only made by the major third and the -7th. So it is rootless because there is no A, okay? And it's also Omit 5 because there is no fifth, okay? So just major third and -7th. Because the major third is the note on the bass, this is literally a first inversion as well. So this is an A7, okay, over C sharp, so A7 over C sharp, so in first inversion, Omit 5, rootless. Okay, so we did say at the beginning of this lesson that we would have talked about things like rootless chords, Omit 5 positions, and first or second inversions here and there. Well, in this chord you really have all of that, okay? You can play it like that, that's up to you. The notes you play are absolutely the same. So guys, how come that we can really think of a secondary dominant, a dominant 7 chord, the tension to go to a major chord, just by using the major third and a -7th? Well, this is because any dominant 7 chord is really defined by the major third and a -7th, okay? I'm referring in this case to shell voicings, really. So if you guys are familiar in the jazz and blues practice to things like and so on, what you play when you play a shell voicing triad is just what you really need of that chord. And if you take the root out, you really are left with the third and the 7th, because the third tells you whether the chord is major or minor, and the 7th generally tells you what kind of 7th chord you are about to play or about to analyze if you're thinking about the music theory and the chord analysis, okay? Now, particularly in the dominant seventh chords. The interval between the major third and the minor seventh is a tritone, and a tritone is just 3 whole steps, 3 tones really of distance, a diminished fifth, and it separates, it divides the octave into equal parts, so you can look at it in both directions, and that's still 3 tones, 3 whole steps, and that's what really generates that kind of interval, you know, that kind of dissonance between the major third and the minor seventh is what really generates the tension of the dominant 7 chord. So it's absolutely great playing an A7 just by using the C sharp major third and the G minor 7 like that, okay? So that's my interpretation analysis of this chord, A7 over C sharp, 5/7 of the 5. The next chord, D major, this is pretty easy, it's just the 5. But this D major is played in a sort of, you know, spread voicing, root and 10th, you know, the major third 1 octave higher, but there is also the open G, which in this case represents the perfect 4th, okay? Now you might have heard of chords called sus4. In this case, we can't say sus4 because we do have a major third, so we are adding this perfect 4th. And generally, when we say we are adding the 4th, we number the 4th 1 octave higher, so the 11th, and we say D add 11. So you are adding the 11th degree, the 4th degree 1 octave higher, to the major chord. But in this case, it's also omit 5, like many other chords that we saw, because there is no 5th. So root and major third placked together, and then just the perfect 4th or perfect 11th, okay? And that's the 5th degree. Now the next chord, actually the next 2 chords, let's look at them together. It looks like a very similar movement to what we did before. Okay, but this time we're going to a minor chord. Now, when I play this, really, the notes that I play are D sharp and A, and then a G here. Well, again, the interval is a diminished fifth. You might think of a diminished chord, but really we've learned now that more likely that's going to be a dominant 7 chord in first inversion, and it's going to be a secondary dominant of the chord we're going to. Now, the chord we're going to, it's pretty easy, I promise. It's just an E minor, okay? Root, minor third, okay? Omit 5, but it's just an E minor. So because this is the 6th minor in the key of G major, the chord that you play just before that is the 5 of that 6, and it's a B7, again, without the note B, okay? So this is your major third, minor 7th, like that. This would be your root. Remember, guys, this is always a major third interval on guitar. So this is major third and minor 7. So again, we are playing a B7 rootless, okay, and in first inversion. Are we also playing an omit 5? Well, this really depends on how you want to name this note. This G that you play here can be considered either the sharp 5 or the flat 6, you know, in this key. Now, why do we ever play a sharp 5 or a flat 6 in a dominant 7 chord? In general, when we play a secondary dominant chord, or in general a dominant 7 chord, if we are going to a minor chord, we like to add even more tension than usual through alterations like the flat 5, the sharp 5, flat 9, sharp 9. So if you consider this the sharp 5, this is one of those alterations that you can include, and it's not then an omit 5, okay, because you're playing a B7 with root, major 7, and then the 5th, but this time the 5th is raised, so it's an augmented 5th, sharp 5, okay. You can write this chord down either as B plus 7, not B7 plus, the plus goes before the 7, it says augmented triad, it says augmented 5th with a minor 7th, or you can say B7 alt to say B7 altered. B7 flat 6 is equally good, especially if you think about the modes, and the modes coming from the melodic minor, the 5th mode, the Mixolydian flat 6. However you want to call it, that's for sure the secondary dominant of E minor. So that's the 5/7 of the 6 minor. The 6 minor is E minor, the 6th note of the G major scale is E, and on the 6th note you get a minor chord. So 6 minor, okay? So, secondary dominant, 5/7 of the 6, and then 6 minor, of course, okay? So B7 over D sharp, okay, or B7 flat 6, B7 sharp 5 over D sharp, and then E minor. From here, we're gonna move only the bass note down to E flat. So this is interesting because so far we've actually seen a sort of counterpoint where we were moving the bass notes chromatically from C to E. In the meantime, we were also moving the notes on top of the melody, but now we also move all of the bass notes still chromatically backwards. So we went from C to E, and now back E, E flat, D sharp, D flat or C sharp, C and B. Okay, so that's really a fantastic arrangement. We said that already, but this is really a fantastic arrangement. Now, from that E minor, you've got several options for this next chord, okay? See that I haven't named the chord yet, because here we've got, in my opinion, 3 different options. I'll try to go over all of them. Stay with me, guys, it will make sense, I promise, but if you do have, questions, or if you have other explanations for this chord, just let me know in the comments. We can discuss about it. I'm just trying to show you all of the possible points of view that I know. Okay, now one way of looking at this is E flat major. Why E flat major? Because every time we play this shape and every time we played it before, like C and D, we were just saying this is a major chord. Root, major third, and in this case, because it's an E flat, so the major third is G, the open string G is another major third, so root, major third, that would be an E flat major. Omit 5, like many other chords, but E flat major. If it's an E flat major, I can hear you thinking like, there's no E flat major in the key of G major, right? Okay. First of all, in the G major scale, the 6th note that you find is E, not E flat, so that's already odd. And the chord that you generate on that E is a minor chord, so this E flat major really doesn't come from G major. Right. This is true, but there is also one thing in music called modal interchange, which is just the practice of borrowing chords, okay? Where can we borrow chords from? From wherever we like? No, we borrow them from parallel scales, okay? So parallel scales are all of those scales starting with the same root. Let's say it this way. So generally speaking, if you are in a major key, the most common key you borrow from is the minor key. If you are in a minor key, the most common key you borrow from is the major key. There are other parallel scales, you can still borrow from them. We will touch this briefly in the course, but this is what happens most of the times. And in the G minor key, okay, which is the parallel minor of G major, the 6th note of that scale, the G minor scale, is actually E flat. That's the flat 6, the minus 6th degree. And the chord that you generate here is a major chord, so a flat 6 major, okay? So this would make 100% sense as a modal interchange, a chord that you borrow from G minor. That's my favorite way of looking at it, okay? But it's not the only one, as I mentioned, okay? So we can think of it as a borrowed chord, an external chord, a modal interchange, flat 6 major. Or you can think that you're still in E minor, so you're 6 minor, but you make that E minor an E minor major 7, okay, and you place that major 7 D sharp on the bass. So this would be E minor major 7 over D sharp, a third inversion of an E minor major 7, okay, omit 5 by the way, okay. Where does this come from? Now, the minor major 7 chords are chords that you find on the 1st degree of the harmonized melodic minor and harmonic minor scales. So you can think of it as kind of like a borrowed chord as well, but from E minor, melodic minor and E harmonic minor. Okay, that's another possible explanation. Again, it's not the only one, and it's just a different point of view. As well as you can think of this chord as a C minor, which we will be playing later in first inversion. Why is that? And rootless, by the way, because there is no C. Because E flat is the minor third, G is the perfect 5th, there is no C, and therefore that would be just a 3 and 5 of a C minor. Now, I've seen, pretty often people calling this chord actually C minor over E flat, first inversion of a C minor. I'm okay with that. You can think about it this way if you like it. However, if we really need to think about a chord that you borrow, because even C minor is obviously borrowed, it's the 4 minor, so again, it's borrowed from the key of G minor, well, it would make sense to consider this the root and say E flat major as the flat 6 major that you borrow still from G minor. Okay, but however you want to think about it, let's recap. This can be E flat major, flat 6 major, flat 6 major borrowed from G minor, okay? Or it could be E minor major 7, just the 6 minor, which becomes 6 minor major 7 in third inversion with the major 7th on the bass, so with D sharp on the bass. Or it could be C minor over E flat, so the 4 minor in first inversion. I'll leave that up to you. These are the three options that I see. If you guys see any other option, just let me know, or in general, let me know which one do you like better out of these three. And from here, we move to the D major like before. That's pretty easy, just the 5 major. It's a D add 11 as we explained. And then the next chord, you might think, well, this is going to be the same A7 over C sharp as before. We're back to the same chord as before, are we? Not so sure really. Well, let's explain this. I think I've seen probably 100% of the transcriptions that I've ever seen of Blackbird with this chord just called A7 over C sharp. And I'm okay with that. If you want to call it that way and just say there is another A7 over C sharp, that's absolutely cool. However, what did we say before? We said that we want to look at the function of this harmony, the function of these chords. Where are they going to? Okay. And generally, we play a secondary dominant when we are going to that resolution, you know, fake resolution, if you want to call it this way. But in this case, where are we going to? Well, we are not going to D. In fact, we are coming from D and we are going to C major. So although I'm okay if you just want to say there is an A7 which simply is not going to D anymore, I really want to propose like a second point of view on this chord, which is really like the secondary dominant of the C. Because we're going to C, let's think about what's the secondary dominant, the 5-7 of the 4, okay? Well, that would be a G7. And when you play these two notes, there is a D flat and a G, so there is a G, okay? The D flat would be the diminished fifth, and you can think of this chord as a G7 flat 5 in second inversion, so with the flat 5 on the bass. It's not the most common thing, but it's not even impossible that you find a secondary dominant altered, like flat 5, going to a major chord, okay? It's common practice when you go to a minor chord, but it does happen sometimes even when you go to a major chord. Just check out the real book, any kind of, you know, jazz standard, and in general the bebop, to have more references on that. But in general, yeah, it might happen. So you might just say that's a G7 over D flat, okay? G7 flat 5 or D flat over D flat, which goes to C major, so the 5-7 of the 4 in second inversion. But there is obviously no major third, no minor 7, so it's not the best explanation for it. Anyway, the cool thing about it, and the reason why I want to discuss this anyway, is because this D flat G can be also looked at as basically as the Tritone substitution of the G7. So G7 is the secondary dominant of C. The Tritone substitution of G7 is D flat 7. So D flat 7 would be the sub 5 of the 4, okay? Which is, you know, really cool, because in this way it would explain the D flat on the bass. It would have that secondary dominant function. It's just the tritone of the secondary dominant, and it's going to C. So I would like to talk about this and see this either as, you know, G7 flat 5 over D flat, but also possibly as a D flat 7, you know, flat 5, okay? And in this way, obviously, there is again no major third, no minor 7th, it's just root, and diminished fifth. That's up to you if you want to see it this way, but I just want to say there is this option to look at it as the 5-7, you know, of the 4, okay? A 5-7 altered, flat 5, you know, and the Tritone substitution of that secondary dominant, like we said. It's a kind of a like double chord substitution, secondary dominant and the tritone of the secondary dominant, okay? But it does happen, okay, sometimes. So that's just a different point of view. Anyway, if you want to say that's an A7 like before, because we did say before it was an A7 over C sharp, that's cool, okay? It's just up to you. Again, let me know in the comments what you think about this. And then we go to C, which is obviously the 4, but then we modulate to C minor. Now, and then we go to a G over B. Now, when this happens, when you play 4 and and then you make it 4 minor, and then you go to 1, although in first inversion, you're really playing what we call a minor Plagal cadence, okay? A minor Plagal cadence is when, Plagal cadence is when you play 4 and then 1, okay? Like 4-1 cadence. But if you play that 4 as a minor chord, again, borrowing it, modal interchange, borrowing it from the parallel minor, you get a minor Plagal cadence to 1. And this is a trick to really write and arrange hits, hit songs, and you can find it in so many pieces of rock and pop, and yeah, it's just a very common thing. It did happen even in classical music, to be fair. Okay, so this is C major, 4 major, basically C minor, 4 minor, okay, and then going to 1. Okay, so there is a modal interchange, a borrowed chord, and then going to 1 in first inversion, so G over B, and then there is A7, D7, G. Why did I play them all together? Well, because A7 and D7 should be looked at all together. Well, D7 here, it's just the 5, okay, the 5-7 of the key, and G is obviously the 1, so it's 5-1, that's amazing, it's just the perfect cadence, and that D7 is played with D, root, C, minor 7th, but then G, the perfect 4th, so because there is no major third this time, we can say sus, so that's a D7 sus 4, going to the 1, okay, 5-7 sus 4, going to the 1. But before that 5-7, we play its dominant, and its dominant it's going to be a secondary dominant, A7, made by root A, major third C sharp, and G minor 7th. There is no 5, so omit 5, A7, omit 5. This time it's not an inversion like the one that we played here, it's an actual root position with the A on the bass. Okay, but it's the same chord that we analyzed before, and before we were playing this as a secondary dominant going to D, and even here that's a secondary dominant going to D, going to D7, which is the primary dominant. So secondary dominant, 5-7 of the 5-7, 5-7, which is the primary dominant, 1. This thing is usually called a cycle of dominant, when you've got a dominant 7 chord, which is the 5 of the chord which follows, okay? Secondary dominant, primary dominant, 1. Okay, that's the full analysis. If you're looking at specific parts of the verse after this, you might also have this little fill, which is 4-1 in first inversion, and again the cycle of dominant, 5-7 of the 5, 5-7, 1. Okay, but that's the full analysis of the verse. Hope you guys are still with me. Now we are ready to have a look at the chorus part 3. So in the chorus there is a modulation indeed, and we play this. Okay, so I'll give it away immediately. We are in the key of F. So F, the first chord, is the new 1. There is a modulation to F, 1 whole step lower from the key of G. This F is played with root and major third, or a 10th interval, and the G represents the second degree, so in a way that's an add 9. An F add 9. It's an omit 5, so the name would be really long, F, omit 5, add 9, but this is what it is, root, major third, and major second here. And then we go to this chord. Now, this chord is the only difficult chord really to analyze in the whole chorus. So we're going to talk about it in a minute, but it looks like the E minor that we played before. The notes that we play are E, G, G. Okay, so it looks like an E minor. We're going to discuss this in a minute. And then you go to D minor, C major, B flat major. Now this is pretty easy. D minor is really the 6th degree minor in the key of F major, okay? And you play D, which is the root, F, which is the minor third, and G, which again is the perfect 4th. So you can say this is a D minor 11 if you like it, or D minor at 11, that's up to you, okay? Then C major, just the spread voicing triad that we explained, so that's the 5th degree, and then B flat, that's the 4th degree, root, major third, and G, which represents the 6th degree. So in a way, this could be called B flat 6, okay? Which is really interesting. Still omit 5, B flat 6, so a 6th chord as well. So now let's go back to what we were saying about this E minor. First of all, what I like to think this actually is more likely a C major, so the chord that we play here, the 5th degree, in first inversion, rootless. Why is that? E is the major third, so C over E. G is the perfect 5th, G is another perfect 5th. So 3 and 5 only in this chord, okay? There's no 7th, okay? And there is no C, so that's definitely rootless. And it's in first inversion simply because the E, the major third, is on the bass. This would make sense. You go like 1, 5, 6, 5. That's my favorite way of looking at it, but I will show you 2 more options, okay? Now, one option is to just think, oh, that's an E minor, like we analyzed the E minor before. However, before we were in the key of G major, and E minor was the 6th degree minor. In the key of F major, you don't have, an E minor. But if you really want to say this is an E minor, you can say I'm borrowing this chord, another modal interchange. But this time the modal interchange is a little bit trickier because it comes from a parallel scale which is called F Lydian, one of the modes of the major scale. In the F Lydian key, you do have an E minor. So that's where it could come from, okay? There's E minor, so major 7th degree of F minor chord, as a borrowed chord from F Lydian, okay? If you really want to say that this is an E minor just because it looks like an E minor. Otherwise, in the key of F major, so without having to borrow anything, you do have an E diminished on the 7th degree, okay? And the E diminished is obviously made by root, minor third, diminished 5th. Now, in this case, you have the root, you have the minor third, there's no diminished 5th. So it's kind of like you don't really know whether this is an E minor or whether this is actually an E diminished, but there is no diminished 5th. I get that it doesn't make much sense, a diminished chord without the diminished 5th, which is the thing that really defines the diminished chord. However, this is just to say possibly this is a 1, 7 diminished, why not? Just without the 5, so omit 5, okay? So the 3 options are, this is an E minor, like it was before, then we are borrowing it, okay, from F Lydian, more likely, or from any other parallel chord, parallel scale and key which contains the E minor. Or it is an E diminished, like the 7th degree of the E of the F major key, that's fine. Or my favorite way of looking at it, the 5, C major, in first inversion, rootless. C major over E, okay? Then we said already D minor or D minor at 11, D minor 11, C, 5th degree, B flat or B flat 6, really, the 4th degree, okay? And then we go up to the 5th degree C major again. We start the second and final time playing 1, the E minor, E diminished, or C over E, okay? D minor again, so once more the 6 minor, C, 5 major, B flat 4 major, okay, B flat 6. But then we go to A7, D7, G. Why is that? Because we are playing a cycle of dominant to go back to G. It's almost like, well, you are in the key of F major, okay, in the chorus, but you want to come back to G major, the first and main key of Blackbird. And how do you do that? You want to go back to G through the secondary dominant of the primary dominant. So you want to go back to G through D7, the D7 sus, the 5/7 sus of the 1 of the G, and you get there with the A7, which is nothing but the secondary dominant, like we explained before, the 5/7 of the 5, 5/7 sus 1, and you start again with etc. Okay, so to recap, this chorus is in the key of F. You've got the 1st degree, then you've got 3 options for this, E minor or E diminished or C over E, which is my favorite way. So in my favorite way, that would be just the 5th degree in first inversion, rootless, 6 minor, 5, 4, 5, start again, 1, same thing about the options of this chord, 6 minor, 5 major, 4 major, then cycle of dominance, 5, like that, 5 of the 5, 5/7 of the 5, 5/7 sus, 1, and start again in G major, okay? And then you come back to the chorus and continue again with another verse. You can follow the structure. But this is the entire harmonic analysis of Blackbird. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed all this, okay? And hopefully you followed every single chord and explanation. You might need to watch it again if you are interested in getting every single detail. I'm sure that I will put the chapters so that you can navigate through the different sections and go where exactly you want to. But even if you missed some of these chords or explanations or possible interpretations for these chords, don't worry. That could actually be, although it's through an example of an actual song, Blackbird, it could be actually like a sort of roadmap of where you are with your music theory knowledge, so that if you know that you are not quite there with the concepts of things like diminished chords or secondary dominant chords or Tritone substitutions, you know that maybe you want to go back and try to really get all of these topics. Remember guys, that I do have a full music series here on YouTube, a music theory series called Music Theory for Guitarists. It's entirely free. You will find the whole playlist linked in the description. It's made by 23 videos of about 1 hour each. They were live streamings. I kept all of the recordings for you on the channel, where I go through all of these topics one by one. So you might want to check them out as well if you want to get deep into one of these topics. Okay. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments what you think about this lesson. If you would like to see more similar lessons to this one, maybe suggest the next song I could analyze like this. If you want to support this channel, if you got any value out of this lesson and you want to support this channel, think about becoming a Patreon. You will find all of the ways to support this channel in the description below as well. Anyway, I look forward to your comments, guys. Thanks for watching, especially if you made it till here, and I'll see you in the next video.